Hi, I'm Alex Exidius, and I'd like to talk to you about the film you're going to see. It had always been my ambition to film the history of the sport, and of the hobby, and of the industry, the whole thing that was the beginning of hot rodding. So I decided to do it right through my vision, the way I saw it. First as a teenager, going up to the dry lakes, watching my heroes run, people like Wally Parks and Vic Edelbrock, and even Bob Rufi. And then after the war, as a speed shop owner, I had a chance to see the industry beginning to grow, people making heads and manifolds and stuff. And then as a competitor, I ran at the dry lakes, the Bonneville Salt Flats, and the drag strips, and managed to get on the cover of Hot Rod Magazine several times. However, before we go any further, I think I should tell you where we are and what you're looking at. We're at the Petersen Automotive Museum in Los Angeles. And this is my favorite hot rod. The SoCal Belly Tank is part of this exhibit of land speed vehicles. And I'm very proud that it is, because there's a lot of history here. And speaking of history, I'd kind of like to comment on the recent surge in restoration of old hot rods. Car enthusiasts like Art Chrisman and Bruce Meyer and Don Orozco and many others have restored these cars so that future hot rodders will be able to enjoy them literally forever. It's a marvelous thing they've done. Now let's get back to the hot rod story. There are several of the cars that have been restored in that film. As an example, the Dick Scritchfield Bob McGee 32, the Dick Flint Roadster, Art Chrisman's Copper Coupe, the SoCal Coupe, Tom Beatty's Belly Tank, the Kins and Leslie Streamliner from Denver, the Wally Parks Hot Rod Magazine Plymouth called Suddenly, Art Chrisman's first dragster, number 25, Mel Heath's car, the Greer Black and Perdone dragster, beautiful car, several of Don Garlis dragsters, and actually many more. I'm sure you'll be able to spot many of these cars in the film as the story unfolds. Several of them are on display at the Wally Parks NHRA Motorsports Museum in Pomona and here at the Petersen. Okay, now let me take you through the opening sequence of the film. It was my goal to have something really different, something dramatic. I had experimented with mounting my camera on a dragster back in the 50s. I'd put it on Art Chrisman's Hustler roll bar, pointed down the track. The result was pretty good. It was an exciting shot. But by the time I started on the hot rod story, dragsters were smoking the tires violently, and they were using parachutes to stop. So I wanted to get that effect, which meant we had to mount the camera low on the front of the car, pointing back at the driver. I approached John Wenderski and Ron Winkle, who had just finished a beautiful black and silver dragster, and I told them what I'd like to do. They said, great, let's do it. So we were off to a legendary drag strip called Lions. In the film, you might pay attention to the car in the other lane as John lines up at the starting line. That's Connie Coletta in his famous Bounty Hunter. I was so busy with the camera, I can't tell you who won that race. I took the film in the next day to the Kodak Laboratory in Hollywood. Don't forget, this isn't tape. This had to be developed. The shot came out great, but I needed more of a build-up. I didn't want to just start with the run. So the next Sunday, we headed out to another famous drag strip in the valley, San Fernando. There we unloaded the car, we fueled it, we got in the fire suit, we did all the preparation. That came out good too. So now, what it amounted to was I had filmed the last segment first, but Hollywood does that all the time, right? The next segment is the cruise. Here the idea was to stretch it out a little bit because I needed some time for the narration to build a story. I got the idea, I went to the LA Roadster Club, I told them, they liked it. We met at Bob's Big Boy in Burbank on a Sunday morning. I bought breakfast, they bought their own gas. Hey, I'm not MGM, right? We went out to the old road to Palmdale. It was the way we used to go to the dry lakes before they built the freeway. It was a complicated shoot, and it took all day, but everybody enjoyed it. Nobody complained. I'd like to mention a couple of the cars in the lineup. The fourth car you'll see is the Dick Scritchfield Bob McGee car that we've talked about. The sixth car is the Dick Flint car, the Dwayne Kofed car. The seventh car in line is Jim Travis's yellow 29. And if you look real closely, you'll see his son, little Randy, sitting next to him. Well, now it's Big Randy, and he just got in the Bonneville 200-mile-an-hour club. The next segments, the Dry Lakes and the Bonneville Salt Flats, need really no explanation from me, but I would like to make one comment. When Wally Parks, Lee Ryan, and Bob Peterson went to Salt Lake City to get permission for hot rodders to run in the famous Salt Flats, it changed the history of hot rodding in a very positive and dramatic way. All of the world records and international records that we've set at Bonneville over the years would have been impossible at El Mirage. The distance restrictions, the course conditions, they just wouldn't have been suitable. So that's why Bonneville is such an important part of our history. At the end of the Bonneville segment, I start explaining the introduction of exotic fuels. And I'm explaining how dangerous and explosive they are. And I'm looking through the camera lens and I notice that Tom Beatty is mixing a batch of this stuff while he's smoking a cigarette. I mean, that's Tom. But it's the next guy I want to tell you about. We'll call him the mad scientist. I got this idea for this shot after we got home from Bonneville, so I had to fake it. We shot it in Burbank in a parking lot at a department store. But that was okay. I just got down real low. I shot up. All you could see was the blue sky and this weird guy. The actor is not really a scientist, but I think you'll notice that when you see the film. I think you would have guessed that. In fact, actually, he's not even an actor. He was my mailman. He got the job not only because he was doing it for free, but he volunteered to take out his false teeth to enhance the weird look. I think you're going to enjoy this segment, and I think you will think he did a good job. Well, right up until the end. The drag racing segment is self-explanatory, but I would like to make a couple of comments. The speeds and the ETs. By today's standards, they're not very fast. But if you'll remember that this was 50 years ago, I promise you they were very impressive for the time. Also, in the opening segment, Don Perdone, driving the Greer Black and Perdone car, made 2 wheelies. I think that was a record at the time for one run. The segment with Roy Richter at Bell Auto Parts, that was my effort to show the growth of the industry along with hot rodding. Poor Roy had to stand there for hours while we set up each shot, but he never complained. He was glad to do it, like everyone else that helped me make the hot rod story. I'm really grateful to all those people. And now it's time for me to fade out and let you watch the film. I really hope you enjoy it.
Technically, this is a 1929 Model A Roadster that's powered by a flathead V8, but to millions of people around the world, it's simply a hot rod. For many years, the terms hot rod and hop-up were very unpopular with the Roadster builder. He worked very hard on his car, and he took a lot of pride in it. And when somebody called it a hot rod, it burned him up, because in those days, hot rod was a name given to any jalopy that lacked fenders and a muffler and scared little old ladies. But try as he may, he couldn't get people to call his car a Roadster. It was a hot rod, and that's all there was to it. So it was decided by the rapidly growing membership of this new sport that if they were going to be called hot rodders, they would try to make the name respectable. As I'm sure most of you know, that battle's still going on. And although it's not over, there have been many victories. And that's what our story is about. The hot rodder's tough climb up the mountain of respectability and the fantastic achievements of mechanical ingenuity, beauty, and performance he's made along the way. Hot rodding got its start in Southern California back in the late 20s and early 30s, and strangely, Mother Nature played the most important role. The mild weather was ideal for roadsters, and the lack of rain enabled you to run without fenders most of the year. But where she really helped was in providing a spot where, by word of mouth, roadster enthusiasts would gather to test and later time their cars. This area is protected from the storms that come in off the Pacific Ocean by huge mountain ranges that hold back the clouds. Without moisture and cloud cover, the sun really beats down, causing the temperature to rise above the normal. The result of all this heat and dryness is the Mojave Desert. And to survive under these conditions takes something special. Like, man, you gotta be a pretty crazy looking tree just to make it out here. And the animals are kind of a rough looking bunch too. In fact, it even helps if you're just a little bit poisonous. But once in a while, the storms will be so severe that they will break over the mountains, and the desert will be flooded by tremendous cloudbursts. This sudden moisture causes the desert to bloom. Now stop grumbling. I know you're not here to learn about flowers. The water also does something important, very important to our story. As it rushes over the ground, it carries with it a sort of dirt called alkali. And after thousands of years of this, it filled the low valleys with its fine silt. Then the sun baked it, and you've ended up with a unique feature of the area called a dry lake. It was to this paradise that a few exploring hot rodders came back in the late 20s. It was certainly well suited for speed trials, and the word soon spread. More and more enthusiasts came, and without any supervision or organization, it got pretty hairy, what with 11 guys going flat out in all directions. But in 1937, 5 car clubs joined forces and formed the Southern California Timing Association. This was to be the foundation for the whole hot rod sport. One nice thing about running at the lakes, everybody was friendly. Hi, Vita. Hi, Carl. That's Carl Orr, the guy that originated the term speed shop. This is Chuck Potvin, who later became a manufacturer of speed equipment. Oh, hi there. In fact, most of today's speed equipment manufacturers were early dry lakes competitors. Guys like Vic Edelbrock, Ed Eskandarian, Bill Wyan, hi there, Paul Schiefer, Stu Hilburn, and many more. For you younger people in the audience, this is a Ford Flathead V8. It was in this class, called Streamliners in those days, that Hilburn would become the first hot rodder to go 150 miles an hour. In 1946, after the war, interest in hot rodding really began to grow. There were 2 major factors in this terrific expansion. One of them was the formation of clubs. The SCTA had 31 by this time just in Southern California. I checked with the International Car Club Association to see how many clubs there were today all over the country, and I was really surprised to learn that there are over 10,000. Now that the interest was growing and clubs were being formed, there was a real need for some form of communication between hot rodders nationwide. That need was fulfilled on January the 1st, 1948, when in a one-room office in the rear of this building, Hot Rod Magazine was born. Today, Peterson Publishing Company covers almost a full block on Hollywood Boulevard, and in addition to Hot Rod, publishes 7 other monthly magazines and many books. From a very modest beginning with 1 employee, Robert E. Peterson now needs over 200 to help him with his growing business. Pete has always been a rabid hot rod enthusiast, and Hot Rod is still his favorite magazine. Bob Green is the editor of Hot Rod, but he's got a lot of talented help. Ray Brock was in Africa on assignment with Don Francisco when we were in the office. Eric Rickman was out shooting pictures. In fact, Bob was pretty busy himself. Tom Medley, who originated the cartoon character Stroker McGurk, is in charge of advertising, and I'd hate to tell you what the rates are to advertise in Hot Rod. Today, any good magazine stand has a terrific selection of automotive magazines and books, but back in 1948, Hot Rod was the pioneer, and it was rough going for a while. But from an early circulation of less than 30,000, it has zoomed to over 750,000. And combined with the others, the total circulation is over 10 million, plus several good newspapers like Drag News. You're darn right hot rodding's popular. But back to our story. After the war, there began to be a change in the roadsters at the lakes. The guys started to build more streamlined cars. Channeling, which is lowering the body over the frame, became popular. And the smaller size T-body was used. Many fine cars were built. A young 18-year-old named Don Waite really started something with the first T-Roadster with the engine in the rear. There were some surplus belly tanks for sale around LA at the time, and they were being used for bodies in the Streamliner class. The team of Bill Burke and Don Francisco came up with the first rear engine model, and this was the start of what would later become famous as the Lakester. As the membership climbed above 1,000, the old lake beds were taking quite a beating. And as the speeds continued to climb, safety became a concern. When the sun set over the Mojave in August of 1949, it signaled the passing of an important period of hot rodding. But the dawn brought with it a new era that would result in speeds beyond the wildest dreams of the early hot rod pioneers. And strangely enough, once again, Mother Nature provided the site. It took millions of years, but the end result was the bottom of a huge lake covered with 5 million tons of salt spread over 3,000 square miles. For the first time, hot rodders had been invited to compete at the mecca of the speed world, the Bonneville Salt Flats. When they arrived, they were informed by a sign that this was the world's fastest racing course. The sign also had a challenge. It told them that a man, John Cobb of England, had flashed across this salt at 403 miles an hour, faster than any other man on Earth. The hot rod record at the lakes in those days was 153 miles an hour, but although it seemed impossible, the challenge was accepted and they began to sign up. The first meet drew only 49 entries, of which I'm happy to say I was one. The SCTA had hauled all their lakes equipment about 700 miles across the desert and then had to assemble it out on the salt. Most of it was towed behind this old panel truck and a little VA-60 for power. What a trip that was. The finish line stand was also built as a trailer, and it was here that J. Otto Crocker set up his timer. In those days, it didn't look too impressive, but it was very accurate, recording speeds to the 1,000th of a mile an hour. The salt was as hard as we had heard it was. Communication was a real problem, but luckily some of the members were also phone company employees and knew about such things. Wire was laid out for the full 10 miles with a phone tower every 2 miles in case a car had trouble along the course. The distances involved at Bonneville are almost unbelievable. And the guy on the phone way down at the 10-mile post was really out of it. If they hadn't painted a line to follow, we probably never would have found our way back to the starting line. Several companies transported their facilities right out to the Salt for the convenience of the participants. Bell Auto Parts assembled a speed shop right on the Salt. And Firestone set up a tent to service the special Bonneville tires that the high-speed cars ran. The condition of the course each year depended largely upon the weather of the previous winter and spring. Under some conditions, a hard, rough crust would form, and the Utah State Highway Department would supply the equipment needed to drag and prepare the course. At times, this work would go on all night so as not to delay the schedule of the meet. There have been times during a meet when the sudden cloudburst would leave the flats a lake once again, but the water would soon soak in and everything would be okay. The soft, wet salt would spray back on the cars, making them look like they'd been in a snowstorm. But generally the course would be beautiful, clean, smooth, and as far as the eye could see, solid salt. Really a fantastic place. And right from the very first, Bonneville inspired the hot rodders. Streamlining became more important at the new, faster speeds, and everyone tried to outdo his competitor in the hope of gaining an advantage by better design. Tom Ruddy favored in closing as much of the front end as possible, and it got him into the 200-mile-an-hour club. Now, Ack Miller, he always used the pointed nose. And Don Waite preferred a knife-edge nose and fairing around the exposed axle. He also didn't believe in leaving too much room for the driver. And when he did get into position, they taped him in. Anything for a little more streamlining. It worked good enough to get the record, though, at 187 miles an hour. The Summer Brothers rear engine T combined brute horsepower and streamlining with outstanding results. They made a record average of over 225 miles an hour with this little bomb. Fred Larson's front engine T is king of the modified roadsters now. Fastest time, 240.642 miles an hour. It wasn't just the roadster classes that were being streamlined. The coupes and sedans were receiving their share of chopping and handling. And here again the object was to out-chop the other guy. Mickey Thompson's first Bonneville car was this twin-engine machine, good for almost 200 miles an hour. And I had a 34 coupe with a couple inches out of the top myself. And here's an excellent shot of it leaving the starting line, heading down the Salt. Our coupe did over 175, but this one blew us off at 180. It's Art Christmas' beautiful little rear-end Model A coupe. Gary Cagle got carried away and came up with this T coupe. I guess that's what it was. I was afraid to ask. Pretty wild, whatever it is. But if you think that's wild, how about this 34? Look, Mom, no rear window. How about this sedan? Guess what that used to be? The Lakester class has remained a favorite, and the speeds have continued to climb until today. These open-wheel cars are exceeding the Streamliner records of just a few years ago. Speeds are up to 280 miles an hour, which makes them the fastest open-wheel cars in the world by far. The only Streamliner they could do is put the man down inside, which they did. One of the old hands with the tank is Tom Beatty, who used to run this one for years, and still is. There have been some at Bonneville who prefer to do it with brute horsepower, pushing the biggest object they can through the air at remarkable speeds. Jim Lindsley stuffed 2 Chryslers in this Channel 32 Roadster and went 202 with it. Big Bill Edwards put a blown CAD in this big box, jammed it through at 151 miles an hour. Fantastic feat. And then Tony Waters and Jim Shagrew of the Bakersfield Smokers put a blown DeSoto in this Highboy 32 Roadster and became the first ones to push a Highboy over 200 miles an hour. The time, 210 miles an hour. Even a few of the bike riders got carried away. How'd you like to jump on that and go 157 miles an hour? The use of stock bodies began to grow in popularity. Sanchez and Cagle were among the first. Their choice of the 53 Studi body was forerunner of many outstanding cars of this model. Speeds rose from an original 140 miles an hour up to 230 in this class. Of course, the strain of pushing these big cars down the salt often proves too much for the engines, like this one out of the Sanchez Studi. The insides got all mixed up together, and the pistons seemed to grip the cylinder wall rather snugly. And the bearings lost interest in what they were supposed to do. It's really quite sickening. Dean Moon put his unblown Chrysler in the Hot Rod magazine Plymouth call Suddenly, and it turned 183 miles an hour, outstanding for the year 1957. One of the most beautiful roadsters to run at Bonneville was Don Rackman's award winner. They were voted Outstanding Car and Crew in 1956. But the class that really got the Hot Rodder his first worldwide recognition was the Streamliner. By the second meet, 2 cars had broken through the 200 mile an hour barrier, and hot rodding was really on its way. This was one of them, the twin-engine Kins Leslie car. It went on to fastest time of the meet for several years. Howard Johansson came up with a unique design for Bonneville with his twin-tank Streamliner. It had less frontal area than the standard Streamliners, but handling problems kept it from reaching its potential. The Hill Davis CT Special was destined for a special place in the hot rod story. This car became the first hot rod to hold a world speed record. In 1952, it averaged 230 miles an hour to establish a new international Class C record, previously held by the giant German Automobile Combine Auto Union. This was one of the largest Streamliners ever to run at a Bonneville meet. Designed after Cobb's car, an accident damaged it and it never ran again. Chet Herbert built several Streamliners over the years, preferring the large bumps over the wheels and narrow body style. Art Chrisman drove one at 235.91 miles an hour. The Shadoff Special, built by Mal Hooper, was the next world record car. It upped the Class C record to 236 in 1953 with Mal at the wheel. Bob Bowen, shown here after a run, drove the car to several international records, including the World Class C at 251 and the Class B at 272 miles an hour. Bob Herta has built several streamliners, and each one has been a construction masterpiece. An aircraft engineer by profession, you can certainly see it in his work. In 1955, Bill Kins was back. And this time he had 3 flathead Ford engines in his Streamliner. That meant 12 carburetors. And when they had to change jets, man, it was an all-day job. With his partner Roy Leslie at the wheel, the car remained the fastest of the meet for 3 more years, reaching its peak average of 266 in 1957. With a one-way top of 270 miles an hour. In 1958, Mickey Thompson stopped by on his way to the Nationals with a new twin-engine Streamliner. And when he got the record at 266.866, Mickey was on his way, turning 330 in 1959. The motorcycle riders had to stretch out to streamline, which resulted in a thrilling ride, but a stiff neck. But Bonneville being Bonneville, the bike guys got the streamlining bug too, and began enclosing their machines with a body shell. This one covers a standard motorcycle, and the rider can support it in the normal way by sticking his legs out through the holes in the body. But Bonneville being Bonneville, naturally somebody had to get a little wilder. There was no provision for the rider to hold this one up, and although this design proved very efficient at high speed, its low speed stability was poor. Then there's the fall down push start. It works a little better. This bike with a 90-inch Harley Davidson turned 224 miles an hour. With some refinement, this Triumph was back again, and this time they had a more efficient way to push. That is, if everybody pushes, fella. Streamline two-wheeler with 40 cubic inches turned a remarkable 214 miles an hour. In 1960, Thompson returned to the salty crust of Bonneville. His car was aptly named Challenger 1, for this was the first hot rod to really have a chance to answer that challenge we first saw on the sign in 1949. And Mickey was loaded for bear. The car was powered by 4 supercharged Pontiacs. It had turned 354 in an early trial run, which made Mick not only the fastest hot rodder, but the fastest American. But the challenge was 403 miles an hour, and that was the goal he had set for himself. I haven't the slightest idea how it must feel to know that soon, if everything goes all right, you may be crossing the surface of the earth at 7 miles a minute. But destiny apparently picked the right man. Mickey is perfectly calm as he settles back in his cramped cockpit. Even mighty Bonneville is calm as the wind gauge drops to 0. The course is near perfect, and the car accelerates beautifully. The car flashes through the timing lights. They are recording the fastest time that man has ever crossed the surface of this earth. In just over 10 years since the first hot rod ran at Bonneville, the challenge had been answered. Mickey Thompson had gone 406.60 miles an hour and somebody remembered to change that sign. In 1961, Arpons ran his big streamliner. The driver sat well out in front, but behind him pushed a big aircraft engine. Once it got you going, it took quite a bit to stop you, including a drag chute. This car had fastest time of the meet at 313 miles an hour average. The Summer brothers were back, this time with a streamliner of their own, and it was a beauty. It looked like a three-wheeler because the rear wheels were in line, one behind the other. With the driver enclosed with the engine and the fumes from the fuel, an oxygen mask is a must. The car became the first single-engine automotive car to break 300 miles an hour when it averaged 302. And there were smaller streamliners. Ever since Thompson exceeded Cobb's speed, there have been persistent rumors that the British had been secretly building a car in New Zealand to retake the record. We were very excited when we heard it had just arrived. Beautiful. Looks like they drove it all the way, right across the bottom of the ocean. Unfortunately, we couldn't let it run. It had right-hand drive. Then it's 1963, and once again they are gathered way out on the salt to test their car. It's hard to believe that it's been 15 years since we first came to Bonneville, all wide-eyed at its tremendous size and reputation. At the first meet, no one reached the 200-mile-an-hour mark. In 1963, 22 cars exceeded that speed. 5 of them over 300 miles an hour. There's been other changes too. They don't broil out in the sun like we used to. And they certainly come better prepared than we did. Bob Herter is an excellent example. Not only does he have an arc welder, he's also got a drill press and an air compressor. And even a garden hose in case he wants to water something. There are several small streamliners now. This one with a little 4-cylinder engine turned 222 miles an hour. In fact, they seem to be getting smaller each year. But this is ridiculous. Yes, it's a real car named Claustrophobia for obvious reasons. A man actually gets in there, don't ask me how, and with the engine, which is 2.5 cubic inches, churning away, it runs through the traps at 55 miles an hour. The cylinder is just about as big as a shot glass, if you know what I mean. Summer brothers were back with top time of the meet at 316. And the interest in the stock body classes continued to grow. This is Lou Bainey's Jekyll Brothers Plymouth, and Lou is either tuning the engine or testing that fender. The fastest super stock is owned and driven by a 62-year-old grandfather named Norm Thatcher, who lead-footed it through at 195 miles an hour. But some things never change. Hack Miller still believes a pointed nose is the answer, and he may be right. He's still setting records. Big Bill Edwards still likes to make trucks go fast. He's got this one up to almost 180. And they still have high-boy roadsters. And do they run? They've got them up to 222 miles an hour now. Down at the finish line, there's been quite an improvement, both in comfort and efficiency. Otto has lots of help now, and his new timer is much more impressive, and its accuracy is accepted throughout the world. So Bonneville continues to be a vast research and development center for hot rodding, with several cars being designed to try for 500 miles an hour. For some, the strain has been too great. But for most, the battle goes on. One favorite area of research has been in the creation of exotic fuel mixtures capable of great increases in horsepower. Sometimes it requires a small amount of some secret ingredient to change a common fuel like methanol into something so explosive that it should be handled with great care. The tension of working with these compounds can affect the person working with them. In fact, this guy looks a little weird. Remember, I said handle it with care. Atta boy. Watch it. I think this weirdo's getting an idea for something never tried before. Salt? Well, it's never been tried before, and there's a lot of it around. As word spread about the terrific performances of hot rods at Bonneville, enthusiasts all over the country wanted to get into the act. Unfortunately, they couldn't all travel the salt flats, and you just couldn't hardly find 5 miles of salt around the neighborhood. But there were quarter-mile strips of asphalt available in most communities, and a new sport was born. They called it drag racing. The growth of the new sport was terrific, but in the rush, most of the guys had forgotten the most important thing to any sport, rules and regulations. A group of men that had been in hot rodding all their lives got together in 1951 and formed the National Hot Rod Association. The president was Wally Parks, who had been chairman of the Bonneville Committee and was editor of Hot Rod magazine. The NHRA grew right along with drag racing, and their rules and regulations were soon being used all over the country. The slogan on their emblem just about sums up how they feel. It reads, "Dedicated to safety." In addition to being very busy sanctioning drag meets, over 1,600 last year, they also publish a weekly newspaper for the sport called National Dragster. The editor, a hot rod enthusiast for many years, is Dean Brown. By 1955, there was so much interest in drag racing nationwide that the NHRA held the first National Drag Championships. They picked a spot right in the middle of the country, a small town with a big strip, Great Bend, Kansas. Over 200 contestants showed up at the registration booth, and they had come from all over the country. Many of them had never heard of a technical inspection, much less been through one, but this was an important part of the NHRA safety program. The young man in charge was Jim Nelson, who later would become a drag champion himself and a partner in the famous Dragmaster Company. And Jim gave him a good going over, I'll say that. This is an early dragster, and as you can see, some of them still ran radiators in those days. This belonged to Jack Moss of Amarillo, Texas, who later built a very quick twin-engine machine. But you got to start somewhere. This is another version of a Midwestern dragster, Mel Heath's car from Oklahoma. This was Art Chrisman's first dragster, a forerunner of his famous Hustler that would set records all over the country. Cal Rice had one of the first dragsters with the long look. It was powered by Doug Hartel's blown Chrysler, one of the first ever to run in a dragster. Bonneville still had some effect on early drag designs. This Offenhauser Equipment Special resembled the Lakester class with the engine in the rear. This car caused quite a stir. It was built by airmen in the Strategic Air Command and was powered by a gas turbine engine. Some of us thought, man, that's the biggest carburetor I ever saw. And others simply thought, wow. The Bean Banish dragster from San Diego was powered by an unblown Buick and was one of the top cars of the early days. The first streamlined dragster was built by the young man that would become famous for his streamlined cars. Who else but old Mickey Thompson? The car was powered by an unblown 302-inch Chrysler that Ray Brown and Bob Bowen had built, and this combination resulted in it being one of the two dragsters that had just broken the 150-mile-an-hour mark for the quarter mile, writing another page in the hot rod story. This is the other 150-mile-an-hour car. It had a carbureted Olds up front, but it got its name from what it had out back. In the bustle was a Cadillac for a little extra push. Another of the early long dragsters, the beautiful Duncan Lisinski machine. Have you noticed how few supercharged cars were running in the early days? I picked out three cars of special interest that are not in the dragster class. This is the first Tennessee Boll Weevil built by Ray Godman. Ray has run at every Nationals meet since, and we'll see his latest car later in the film. There's quite a difference. Now this car was actually ahead of its day. Dave Marcus, with the help of his club, the Motor Monarchs, built this 32 Roadster, and although it looked great with the body on, it's when they took it off that the car really shined. And I mean shined. The man-hours and loving care that went into this car are quite evident. Built for go as well as show, Dave had the fastest time of the meet in his class at 117 miles an hour. The third car I wanted to show you is this 53 pickup loaded to the hilt with about 8 tons of equipment, plus Jazzy Nelson's Fiat Coupe. The truck, powered by a Cadillac and owned by Webb Callahan, hauled all this stuff, which took half a day to unload, plus the coupe and trailer, 1,400 miles from L.A. After it was unloaded, it became a push car. Incidentally, as far as I can remember, that's the first Fiat Coupe to ever run at the drags. And it went quick, with the second best ET of the meet at 10.90 seconds. But back to the truck. Webb had entered it in C gas and went all the way to runner-up with a speed of 101 miles an hour. That's a pretty average tow car. Then it was time for the dragsters to make their tune-up run. Thompson straps himself in. He's gone through this procedure in just about every kind of machine there is, and as we now know, he would later become the fastest man on wheels. We were impressed with the timing tower at the starting line. It was the first double-decker we had ever seen. Early dragsters were built with the theory, if you don't need it, leave it off. Next up, the Bustle Bomb, one of the first with disc brakes, and it had a swing axle rear end. This is the fastest run of the meet, 151 miles an hour in 10.48 seconds. Art Chrisman next, 145 miles an hour, the fastest single-engine time of the meet. Then Mickey at 143. Art finally found one that lights up the tires. Wow! I found something else, too. This is the Arpon Green Monster. Wasn't much out of the chute, but by the far end it got going pretty good, except this time it blew up. But they weren't the only ones having trouble. The Chrisman brothers were putting in another transmission because a funny thing happened to the other one. The Lakewood Muffler crew, they're replacing their engine. Something beat a piston to pieces and then went to work on the cylinder wall. Yeah, drag racing can be fun. There wasn't too much interest in the stocks in those days, and the hottest were usually Olds 88s. Now the dragster elimination. Under a very dark sky, the Bean Bandits take Christmas. Next, the Bustle Bomb breaks the beam first. Then Thompson and Cal Rice. With Rice winning it. Mel Heath takes his class, and then it rained all night. And the next morning, the course was too damp for competition. But an important chapter had been written. Hot rodders from all over the country had gotten together to compete under the same rules and regulations. And drag racing was on its way, thanks to these pioneers who fought it out on the plains of Kansas. The tremendous growth of hot rodding has resulted in a major industry. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that speed equipment sales exceeded $1 billion last year. To meet the demand, the suppliers, like Bell Auto Parts, are faced with a terrific inventory problem. This is Roy Richter, the owner of Bell Auto Parts. When Roy's business first started way back in the 20s, the inventory consisted of Model A equipment, a couple of downdraft manifolds, and a head or two. When old Henry brought out the flathead V8, several manufacturers started making heads and manifolds for them, and the inventory started to grow. There were cams, dropped axles, steering wheels, flywheels, crash helmets, pistons, shocks, gauges, air cleaners, pressure pumps. And then the overheads came along and things really started to go wild. All kinds of manifolds, valve covers, mag wheels, chrome wheels, wheels, sway bars, shift kits, slicks. In fact, even Roy got a little worried. Then there were fire suits and gloves, bodies, baubles, bangles, and beads, adapters, more adapters. Sorry, Roy, but I don't know what to tell you. You've got all this stuff that makes them go, but how about something to make them stop? Great. Thanks a lot, Roy. We'll see you later. Now, the hot rodder faces somewhat the same problem. Each time he buys a new part, he likes to display the manufacturer's decal on his windshield, which is fine. They're usually attractive and quite colorful. But it does get to be a problem. If this guy buys one more thing, he's in trouble. But he does need a crash helmet, and... well, now what do? Actually, there's only one thing we can do. Transplant his eyeballs. There. Now, some manufacturers prefer to put their message across with T-shirts. You did get the message. By 1963, drag racing had grown into a tremendous spectator sport. The NHRA's Winter Nationals of Pomona played to a full house of over 60,000. Outside, some telephone linemen came to the aid of two chicks in distress and provided them with a seat overlooking the starting line. and the super stock class was one of the favorites by this time. The runoff for Mr. Stock Eliminator was between the Golden Commando Plymouth and the Candy Stripe Ram Chargers Dodge. The Dodge wins it at 12.44 seconds at 115 miles an hour. And Al Ekstrand receives a beautiful trophy from the Queen. Now it's time for the big fuel burners. Here's Don Garlis with a wild-looking airfoil designed to increase traction and stability, and there's the Colonel Art Malone. On the way to the final runoff for fuel top eliminator, Garlitz takes to Porter Reese Old. And Malone is also taking care of his share. Then the two of them square off. Garlitz's blown Dodge and Malone's blown Chrysler. After a tremendous display of brute horsepower and burning rubber, Garlitz gets there first in 8.2 seconds. He also displays a big smile as he receives the trophy from the Queen. Dragsters are getting longer and longer and longer. Now the gas burners. Peters and Frank take Jack Christmas. Is Connie Collette and his Bounty Hunter. By this time, it's hard to find the starting line, and they had to call out the smoke sweeper. There. Finally, it's the twin Chevys against the Chrysler-powered Colletta machine, and Peters takes it. The next big meet was at Bakersfield. The Smokers Fuel and Gas Championships. The brute horsepower on display was fantastic. Art Malone, Tommy Ivo, and Don Yates watch as one of their competitors moves up to the starting line. Big Daddy Don Garlitz. Next, Terrible Tommy Ivo. The new Gotelli rail. The fantastic Peters and Frank. Here are two quick coupes. Watch the red one. Pow! Next, Perdone, who was last year's top eliminator, wins another round with a quick 802 ET. As each round gets tougher, it's the McEwen-Adams against Garlitz. It's McEwen at 182 miles an hour. Perdone is back again this time against Art Malone. Don almost lost it coming out of the hole, and Malone wins it at 184.80 miles an hour. Now that collecting man, Gordon Collette, wins the gas top eliminator with a time of 177.86 miles an hour. Then Tommy Ivo makes a spectacular run, looking very much like a rocket shot at the Cape. Time 185 miles an hour. It's time for the top eliminator runoff, and the two that have survived the toughest competition in the country are Art Malone and Tom McEwen. The run is one of the closest ever held, with Malone winning it by half a wheel. The ETs were Malone 8.33, McEwen 8.31. Malone got a 0.03 of a second jump at the line and held it. A new wrinkle in drag racing started a few years ago on the West Coast, and this is one of their dragsters. The boat enthusiasts got together, substituted a 1/4 mile of water for asphalt, put the pits right on the beach, and they had a very exciting sport going called boat drag. Always noted for their meticulous work, the boating fraternity went all out on their drag machines. They are beautiful. and they didn't lack for power either. That's an Allison aircraft engine and the Purple People Eater. Built for show and go would certainly be the rule and not the exception with this group. Now the record run. How's that for a wheelie? This is a racing craft driven by Bob Ellis. The speed 135 miles an hour. Next is the famous White Mist. Look at that terrific rooster tail. The speed 122 miles an hour. Here's another racing craft. This one, the XP, and driven again by Bob Ellis, with another terrific rooster tail. Time 128 miles an hour. Now the one everybody's been talking about, the Golden Thing. It's a new world's record, 149 miles an hour and 8.44 seconds. Oops! The driver's okay, and it looks like they're going to save the boat. Air is trapped in the hull. And now the drags. The competition is keen in these classes, and boy, they're riding right on the prop. During the afternoon, the wind comes up and the water gets pretty rough. These guys are riding right on the thin edge. Now watch the man on the left. Oh, good night. Yes, drag racing can be exciting. The last big meet of the season is the granddaddy of them all, the NHRA National Drag Championships. The Nationals are held in Indianapolis, Indiana over the Labor Day weekend. Hot rod enthusiasts and their families converge on Indianapolis in such great numbers that most of the hotels and motels are loaded. So many of them set up housekeeping in the huge fields surrounding the drag strips. Some of them hate to get up in the morning. Good morning there, little girl. Let's open those big blue eyes and go the drags.
Rat thing.
Gee, what a grouch. Oh well. They come pretty well prepared with all the comforts of home. And for those who wish to sleep next to their dragster, it's ideal. A little smoke never has been known to bother a good hot rodder. But they're awake at the strip. Constantly trying to improve their product, the NHRA used a new starting system this year. It uses a tower with 4 sets of lights, one set directed toward each contestant, the other 2 toward the spectator. When the drivers are ready, the starter pushes a button that starts the lights from top to bottom. If a car should jump the green light, a red light will go on in that lane and the car is eliminated. The facilities and the crews for timing, class call-up, announcing, and most of the many other activities needed to conduct a meet of this size are located on the 3 floors of the DA Tower, just behind the starting line. The view is great, and so is the job turned in by these guys. If a car gets the red light we mentioned earlier, and as the officials are indicating with great pantomime, it is eliminated. Then the Harada-Hobbs rail gives us a bad smog condition. Next, Tony Nancy's new Plymouth Powered Beauty. and Tony wins it in 8.68 seconds. Guess who's back? Don Garlits. For those of you who have often wondered what happens to the dragsters in between elimination runs, I picked out 3 of the best, and I found they weren't sitting in the shade. Far from it. This is Sneaky Pete Robinson taking advantage of the time to set the valves on his supercharged Chevy. Now, Tony Yancey was checking his plugs and found he really had something to worry about. There was aluminum showing on a couple of them, which meant 2 pistons were burning. Without time to change, all he could do was hope they would last. One of his competitors dropped by to offer his sympathy. But the jumpin'est crew in the pits belonged to Don Garlits. Big Daddy had big troubles. He heard the rear end go at the finish line, and they've got to change it. The problem is, will they make it in time? Incidentally, they all run gas at the Nationals. Remember the original boll weevil at the first Nationals in Great Bend? This is the latest version, and there's been some improvements. Ray Godman still is just as enthusiastic as it was 9 years ago, and very successful. Since the rain out at the first meet, the NHRA is understandably jumpy about rain, so they now have the service of this Indian rain dancer. I guess you'd say no rain dancer. Good night, I guess you'd say no dancer at all. But now, the next round of dragster elimination. One of them's a little squirrely. A newcomer from New York, Ron Abbott, catches Robinson asleep at the line and wins easily. Watch Garlits on the left get the jump. Don wins it at 173 miles an hour. Let's get back to the 3 we were checking on. It's all over for Pete. And Nancy is still showing aluminum. This is Steve Swadja, who designed Nancy's car and also did our tidal joints. His job is to fill the water tank, which really isn't much of a job at all. But the Garlits crew is hard at it again. This time, Don thought he heard the clutch go, and they've got to check it. His friend and competitor, Connie Coletta, lends a hand. Again, time is the problem. Keeps tremendous pressure on Garlits and his crew. It's time for the next to the final round, and Nancy starts to get ready. His opponent will be Garlits, if he can make it. Tony's ready, and they've just finished with Don's car. So 2 of the best in the country line up. Garlits takes it, and Nancy's pistons blow. So now there are only 2 left to see who will be the top eliminator in the big AA dragster class. One of them is that rookie from New York, Ron Abbott. The other, holy mackerel, they're at it again, is an old pro from Florida named Garlits. This time I was afraid to ask what was wrong. I'm sure you can appreciate that the rookie is feeling a little nervous. At his first big meet, he suddenly finds himself in the final runoff. To make things worse, he's got to go off with Big Daddy. That is, if Big Daddy makes it. Then the first call goes out for AA dragsters, and the old swamp rat has made it again. There's been 38 elimination runs in this class, and Don's ETs have been slower than most of them. But can he do it one more time? Watch Garlits get a perfect start. And although it was close, Big Daddy wins it. The final day of the meet, the top 10 fastest dragsters go at it again to see who will race Garlits for Mr. Top Eliminator. They also match up the other classes for Middle Eliminator and Little Eliminator. That's the famous Montgomery Willys. During the heat of competition, a car can start to blow at the line and leave oil and parts halfway down the strip. The battle for Mr. Stock Eliminator pits the 50 fastest super stocks against each other, and most of these names are famous all over the country. The final run was between two famous Dodges, the Ram Chargers and the Lawman, with the Ram Chargers winning it by 1/100th of a second. In the run for top eliminator, Garlis jumped a moment too soon and was red lighted, so the national champions are Harada and Hobbs. During our story, we have seen many outstanding runs through the timing lights all over the country. Hot rodding has proven itself to be a very exciting sport. But is that all there is to it, speed and excitement? Or does all this mechanical ingenuity pay off for the hot rodder in other ways? In his job, for instance. As an example, let's take another exciting project, the greatest adventure man has ever attempted, the journey to the moon. I picked 3 men, and there are hundreds more, with the natural mechanical ability it took to be a hot rodder, carried over into a better, more interesting job. And just as important, a real benefit for our country. Don Waite, who has held records at all the old dry lakes, Bonneville, and the drags, is now a consulting engineer, and his travels take him to the great space centers, including Cape Kennedy, where he is involved with the Saturn moon rocket. Another record holder, he presently holds the world's Class B record at 274 miles an hour, is Bob Bowen. He is now an engine testing engineer at the famous Rocketdyne Test Facility in Canoga Park, California. This is Bob's little old test stand where he runs one of his 1,000,000 horsepower Saturn engines. The fuel tank on this stand would make Dean Moon green with envy. It holds 45,000 gallons of fuel. But when Bob turns on his fantastic engine, it gulps it down in 240 seconds. In the background is another of the giant test stands Rocketdyne has scattered through the Santa Susana Mountains. When Bob tests, you know it. Several of the astronauts are also hot rod enthusiasts, so the first trip to the moon could go something like this. This is astronaut 072 making final check. Fuel pressure A-OK, cabin pressure A-OK. All systems go, beginning Wait a minute. Where's my hot rod magazine? You might as well shut this big weenie out, because I'm not going without it. Well, that's our story. But with cars being built to try for 500 miles an hour at Bonneville, and streamlined dragsters under construction in an effort to exceed 200 miles an hour at the drag strips, it's certainly not the end. Actually, it's just the beginning.